What is going on, everyone? Matt McCarthy here for another episode of GR Weekly. In this week 7 1 p.m. breakdown, we're not going to be breaking down every single 1 p.m. game. Why? Well, because we have 3 games in the 4 p.m. slot on Friday that have spreads of 12.5 or more. Because this is the BYENADO, and we have entered just an absolute hellscape. 6 teams on bye. You can see scrolling down at the bottom of the screen here. We got Jacksonville, Buffalo, Dallas, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, and the Chargers all on bye this week. On top of 2 games that have 50 points over unders on the entirety of the week. We have some revenge games, like we have the Rams versus Detroit. That's fun. We have some games that have an over 17 point spread, like that Arizona Houston game. We do have some, I think, competitive games. One of those, I hope for God that it is the Thursday night game with Cleveland having a bunch of injury issues we're going into in a moment. But as I told about on the Monday show, every day, every 3 days a week, 7:30 p.m., I am here live. But we're also putting the shows now in audio-only formats as well through Podbean. I believe also Spotify is where you can find the audio-only versions of this podcast. And with that, we're going to really get into what, as of right now, is a game that is happening in football in Week 7. Denver versus Cleveland. Cleveland, the line has been moving. It is now Cleveland -2. It was at -3.5 to start. I'm a little surprised that Denver is still not the favorite team in this one. But 42.5 point over under is still what I saw online. But Denver is going to be I think in for a rude awakening if they don't come out with a victory in this one, because Cleveland is going to be without Baker Mayfield, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. Odell Beckham Jr. was a DNP for both Monday and Tuesday practices. Both starting offensive tackles can also possibly be out for the Cleveland Browns. Case Keenum is going to be under center. Dearness Johnson and Demetric Felton are going to be splitting time in the backfield. This is a bad offense now. I'm curious to see how much of their tight end that they have 3 of, they're going to be just running around doing things, because I think this is going to be a bad, boring game. And there's a few of that this week that I am just not very excited for to cover. But in this game, I'd like to not start any of the Cleveland players if I can get away with it. Odell Beckham Jr., if he does start, is going to be a flex option at best for me. Now, I understand that Dearness Johnson was a big waiver addition this week. Fun, great, awesome. But Dearness Johnson, for me, I can only push him up as high as running back 24. Currently, I have him listed ahead of guys like Damian Williams, Javonte Williams that is in this game. I'd like to go in other places if I can, because he's a starting running back for a team that is still technically favored at home, but I'm still not super ultra confident in necessarily how many points he's going to score. I can just feel good about how much his workload is going to be, and that's really just kind of all we're kind of giving to him. Other than that, still the tight ends with Case Keenum, I'm not particularly excited for. I don't really like anyone on this side of the ball at all, which means we got to move over to the Denver Broncos side and see if there's anything we can really like about them. Jerry Jeudy is the one big thing. Eventually, he's going to be coming back. He's been listed to return from IR, so I don't particularly see him starting this game. I don't think he's been activated. But going forward, what does that really change for them? Tim Patrick, I think, would take a big hit there. But they were still able, I think they could use all 3 receivers in an effective way. Those 3 plus Fant, whatever going to get out of their running backs. I still don't think this is a team that needs, exceptional quarterback play, but with Teddy Bridgewater, I think as of right now, is not a quarterback that I think is really pushing the envelope, but he's not leading them to losses. I understand that there's some trade rumors swirling that possibly Denver is caught up in the Deshaun Watson to a Tagovailoa sort of situation. As it stands right now, I believe Deshaun Watson or Tua will not be going to Denver. It will still be Teddy Bridgewater under center for them. So for our purposes, we're not going to be thinking too much about them moving in that sort of spot. But for these Denver players, Courtland Sutton, it is a bad receiver week. There's about 6 or 7, maybe 8 guys that I think are in good spots, even less so for running back and tight end. But Courtland Sutton just outside that very good starts, but still a top 12 receiver for me, one of the highest air yards players in the league right now. it kind of holds to what Cleveland has been doing. They've been caught up in some high scoring games. They've had a particularly tough schedule. Bottom 5 in both quarterback and wide receiver fantasy points allowed on the season. They are second strong, I think, against running back. So I'm not sure if it's one just downplaying the other. We have seen this in the past where you can just kind of do whatever you want through the air, or high scoring games allow for low running back totals. I expect this to be an overall low scoring game. This is the tied for lowest over under on the entirety of the week. I don't expect big scores. So Son and Fant, I think, are must starts to the relative positions. And then at running back, I still lean Gordon. Gordon has been the better player for the two running backs for the entirety of the season, 4-2 in terms of who has come out on top in terms of fantasy points scored on the weeks in full PPR through 6 weeks. Javonte Williams, for what they're doing, it works very well for them to split carries down the middle. It's annoying for us for fantasy purposes, but it's very good for what they're doing there in Denver, keeping those running backs healthy and able to be activated at a moment's notice in the game and come out and be somewhat efficient. Moving on to Atlanta versus Miami. Again, not a lot of games today, as you see scrolling on the bottom of the screen here if you are watching the video. 6-7 games or so we're going to be covering today, as the rest, which would be Carolina versus the Giants. I was waiting on the New York Giants news. It looks like we're not going to be having Kenny Galladay. It looks like we're not going to have a Saquon Barkley this week. That was sort of stuff I was waiting for to cover on Friday. And Cincinnati versus Baltimore. We're looking for games to talk about on Friday because, again, Detroit versus the Rams, Houston, Arizona, and Chicago, Tampa Bay all seem like really, really bad, boring games because one side seems like they're just going to dominate the other. But we want to have some sort of games in there we can have some conversation about and not have a 10-minute podcast where it's, hey, play the guys from the team that's going to win by 30. So Atlanta versus Miami, very, very close game. 2.5, just the second closest of the week. 47.5 point over under. I still think it's a little odd that Miami was not allowed a bye in this. The 3 of the last 4 of the other 4 teams that have played in the London games were on bye. Atlanta was one of those back in week 5. But in week 6, Miami does not get the bye going to week 7 that Jacksonville is granted. Miami does not have their bye until week 14. So that is something. But Atlanta versus Miami, starting on the Atlanta side, Ridley, Pitts, Patterson, all must starts. Patterson's also a must start at both positions. I am a Fantasy Pros ranker. You can find my ranks in my pinned link under my profile over on twitter.com at methodical1. But as must start for both running back and receiver, site preferences as to what he's actually listed as. Some sites it's running back, sometimes receiver, sometimes it's both. So not sure exactly to where you have it, but that's where it will be listed as for me under both of them. In a week of bad games, are some massive spreads. A close game like this looks pretty good in terms of who we can get some solid fantasy points out of. Matt Ryan coming off the bye, I think is a top 10 option here. Miami's 4 games this season of 27 or more points allowed and 300 plus passing yards allowed in the last 2 games. I mean, they lost to Jacksonville. This is kind of what we're looking at. Miami, I like to say Washington is my most disappointed team so far. Probably would have been Kansas City if Washington beat Kansas City. But beyond the Washington football team, Miami's got to be up there. A team that we thought could be a 10-7, 11-6 type team is 1-5 currently. So, and they're looking to possibly do trading their quarterback. So let's see how that goal goes. But prefer Mike Davis to Gaskin, both top 24 for me. I like him better than the non-Melvin Gordon running backs in that Denver-Cleveland game. So it shows where I'm kind of thinking of Mike Davis again. This is a situation where going into the year, the draw for Mike Davis was not his rushing work. It was his receiving work. Now, unfortunately, Cordero Patterson has turned into a multi-level threat that can do many different things across the field that hampers what Mike Davis can do. Because if it was just one guy getting all this receiving work, that would be really, really good. Now, a lot of that has gone Patterson, and he's a receiver playing running back, which is what made him such a mismatch in terms of in fantasy lineups, what he's actually doing for his fantasy point output. But Dolphins, bottom 5 in targets, 2 running backs. Davis and Patterson look to be in very nice spots here to be in positions to actually get more receptions than possibly would have been doing in in weeks prior. Davis, especially because Patterson's been doing a lot all over the field. Moving over to the Miami side, we got to the one big thing real quick is Myles Gaskin. The yo-yo ranking of sinking him against Tampa Bay, then pushing him up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. A lot of people, what I'm looking for in the early outputs of ranks on Fantasy Pros, a lot of other rankers are pushing him down past running back 24. I don't like this. We like him, then we don't like him, then we like him again. I don't want to do that. Let's get some little bit of consistency. Last week, the snaps percentages were very strange. Prior to week 6, Miami's had a running back have a snap percentage of 50 or more. Now, might have not been Myles Gaskin, might have been Malcolm Brown, but there was at least one guy who was getting a good amount of work. And then last week decided to mix all three of Gaskin, Brown, and Ahmed all around like 20 to 30% or so. Very annoying stuff. Gaskin can literally not play any worse. Like 2-3 drops in that game that were pretty bad. I'd like to think that he can get closer to what his season high has been in 15, only 2 games so far of 15 plus touches, 1 game of 10 plus carries. Gaskin was a player like Mike Davis that would go into the year where we weren't exactly saying he was going to have a great rushing workload. It was going to be on his catches. So he's not seeing the receiving work, which is leading him to be a annoying sort of start. But I'm trusting him somewhat in a bad week to put in a performance and against an Atlanta team in a close game possibility where we can get some good fantasy points out of him. Moving on to the rest of the Miami Dolphins. Tua, still a Miami Dolphin, just outside my top 12. Honestly, once you get past quarterback 5, which is currently Kyler Murray for me, because that game seems like it's going to be possibly out of hand in a real hurry. You can kind of rank them as you wish. Because they're all very close together for me. There's not really much standing out from one guy to the next, in all honesty. But Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki must starts at their positions. Waddle, big breakout last week. Mike Gesicki getting some consistency coming over from Jacoby Brissett, who was showing some favoritism to him. We still saw him in, I believe, 100-yard receiving yard performance against Jacksonville back in last week in week 5. Moving on. New York Jets, New England Patriots. We have seen this story before. New England -7, 42.5 point over under. It's been a month since their first meeting. If anyone forgets, that's the game that Wilson had 4 picks on, 3 of those, like basically on his first, 3 or 4 pass attempts. 6 total points. Good stuff out of them. You're not playing him. I'd like to say you can sit Michael Carter, but a lot of people are not going to have options this week at running back. Low end starter for me, still less snaps on the season overall than Ty Johnson, but Coleman is no longer really a factor in this offense at all. So we're at least getting a little bit more consolidation of what the workload is going to be going towards. Carter seems to be getting stronger and stronger every week in terms of what we can think of him. This is still just a bad matchup in New England. I do not like a lot of what's going to be coming out of this Jet side. Jamison Crowder and Corey Davis, wide receiver 3-4 is just flex at best. I like to sit him if I can, but that's if I can. Patriots. Week 6 Cowboys matchup was one where you could see where I think the whole team was in a good spot to get some fantasy production. But here I kind of just want Damian Harris only, not really looking to be rewarded for what Jacoby Myers has been doing through the air, right? So Jacoby Myers, 12th most targets of all wide receivers. And here's currently the list. Let's take a second to go through the list. I put this up on Twitter at Methodical1. But here is the top 12. And we list them off in terms of targets. And I'm going to tell you their, and I'm also going to tell you their points total in full PPR on the season. So your number 1 receiver so currently in fantasy is Cooper Kupp. He leads in both targets and in fantasy points. Devontae Adams has the 2nd most targets. He is 3rd in scoring. Tyreek Hill is 3rd in targets, 2nd in scoring. Right? DJ Moore, 4th in targets, 9th in scoring. Justin Jefferson, 5th in targets, 6th in scoring. Now look at the next 4 receivers. I think if you're looking for buy low opportunities, these are the 4 guys I think you want to be looking at because their target numbers are not matching up with their fantasy point outputs. Keenan Allen, he is the 6th most targeted receiver, but he is 25th in points scored. Stephon Diggs right behind him, 16th in points scored. Brandon Cooks, 17th in points scored. Terry McLaurin, 9th most targeted wide receiver, 18th in points scored. So 16, 17, 18 all in a row right there, which is fun. Mike Williams, this might be a reason why Mike Williams is getting a little bit more boom for his buck. 10th in targets, 4th in points scored. Cortland Sutton, he is the 11th most target receiver, 19th in points scored. And there he is, Jacoby Myers, 12th most target receiver, 34 in points score. So you're talking about a guy who's seeing target numbers with the elite of the NFL, but he's barely a flexible type receiver week to week. That is some really annoying stuff. And he's seeing more targets than guys like Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans, DK Metcalf, Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper. How can a guy be targeted this much and not get any good fantasy points when he doesn't score, right? And I think the 2-point conversion that happened last week was kind of a blue ball situation, a better way to say it. He just cannot get into the end zone. I think it's just really rude of them to have that 2-point conversion. At least he gets to touch the paint of the end zone at least once a week, because that's some really rough stuff. Moving on, Washington, because no one else will want to start in that game. It's really just Harris. Ramondre Stevenson, does he get a little bit more receiving work? They say they want to carve out a role for him. That sounds fine and dandy. I don't want to just go off of 1 week. In a week where goes to overtime, plays Cowboys, where they have to, really step up their offense. The New York Jets, if they score like 10 points, they can kind of just coast. I mean, the Jets are a team like that where they're barely averaging right now over 10, 11, 12 points per game. So no need to really step on the gas for the New England Patriots. Washington versus Green Bay. We only have 2 games left on the show today. Again, we're going to be making a push to have more games on the Friday show because of how I don't really want to just go into it and say, okay, well, 3 of these games are just going to be really bad, so let's just push those ones to later. And we were looking for more information, especially of that Carolina Giants game. We did get it right before I went on air, so we didn't get to have all the Kenny Galladay and the Saquon Barkley news and all that sort of stuff, right? But Washington versus Green Bay. Green Bay favored by 9.5, 49-point over/under. Starting with Washington, we need to get our one big thing here is our Antonio Gibson's status on that shin injury. He's gotten an MRI, but we have not gotten the news yet, which does not sound encouraging. Seeing some chatter on the Twitter timeline that when you don't get the news back real quickly, it's because you're seeing for a second opinion on what might be going on with his shin. Now, Jared Patterson would be a waiver wire pickup because J.D. McKissic is most likely already rostered in any league you play in. J.D. McKissic, I'm currently ranking that Gibson is going to be either ineffective, maybe limited, or not playing. Currently, he is my running back 13. I don't think I'll move him past that, and I think that's pretty much where he's going to stay. So I'm going to rank him just kind of right there and just keep him there. And Antonio Gibson is active. He will move into the rankings, but I don't think I'll lower McKissic. I think he's a great play no matter what against this Green Bay defense that in a game where we're going to be seeing the Green Bay offense kind of do whatever they want, because we're going to get to why Washington is a bad football team. But Jared Patterson, we'd not really see him get any work in week 6 because they were already pushed into a out of contention, let's hurry the ball sort of situation late in the game with no Gibson in the fourth quarter. But they were very much out of it. Kansas City was well in hand at that point. It was just dump off city for McKissic, which is something we're kind of wanting to see again. Just throw the ball 2 feet to McKissic, let him go pick up 5 yards. At full PPR, you just picked up a whole point and a half for basically no work at all. We like that stuff. McLaurin and Ricky Seals-Jones both must starts for their positions. Ricky Seals-Jones is actually my preferred tight end of this game because he did something that Robert Tonyan has failed to do, which is get over 10 yards in a game outside of one that he had back in week 2 or 3. I'm also not expecting Curtis Samuel in this game. No external option I would recommend in his place on this team. Adam Humphries, De'Ami Brown. I'm not a big fan of either of those guys. It's McLaurin, Jones, and the running backs only. Taylor Heineke is outside my top 12. Round quarterback 15, 16. Again, there's just a big mess of guys right in that 10 to 17 or 18 spot. I mean, when I go look at my rankings right now, we talked about earlier on the show, Matt Ryan. Currently, my quarterback 9, guys like Derek Carr, Tannehill, Jones, but all the way down to like Justin Fields, right? Quarterback 17, Justin Fields. And when you get a fresh, clean sheet to rank on Fantasy Pros, he was a lot higher. He was like around top 12 option. This is technically a week where you should trust Justin Fields, but I just can't because they're not doing anything offensively that makes him worth starting. I understand if you're going to be doing anything against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you're going to be throwing the ball. Really banged up secondary, really brutal run defense team. You just don't do that. So it's a kind of possibly a bad day for Khalil Herbert or Damian Williams. I like to not start either of them. But it's a really spot where all these guys, Bridgewater and Darnold and Heineke, it's all just, in a lot of my leagues, I put in 17 sort of $0 bids, just whichever quarterback I do get. If if I don't have Allen or Dak or something like that, or Herbert, it's not a bad week to have a team looking bad, because all the good, 4 or 5 of those teams are on bye are excellent teams, top to bottom in terms of fantasy. So it's really not a bad situation to be in a bad spot here in week 7. Moving on to this Green Bay team. In a bunch of bum spots in games and, awkward sort of starts. The one thing we really say is that all big 3 of the Green Bay Packers are excellent starts, all in the top 3 in the ranks in their positions, that being Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Jones. So we got to talk about this Green Bay defense. Why are they in the Washington defense? Why is Green Bay in such a good spot? Washington has allowed the most points in the season. They've allowed the second most yards. And I'm curious to see if their schedule's been enough for them to have this points and yardage total be as high as it is. Currently, they have faced the LA Chargers, who is the only team they allowed less than 29 points on the season. The New York Giants, Buffalo Bills, Atlanta Falcons, New Orleans Saints, and Kansas City. Now, the Chargers, Bills, and Chiefs, we can definitely say are great offenses. Giants, Atlanta, and New Orleans are average to mediocre, I will say. New Orleans, I would say, probably the worst of the 6. And Atlanta and the Giants are definitely in awkward spots. And the Giants were on that very hobbled week 2 situation. They're more hobbled now. But that Thursday night football game, where I thought they were one of the worst teams possibly go into a week 2 Thursday night football game, they almost beat them. So this is a bad spot. They've been to just I'm just so frustrated every time I look at this Washington team, because I thought this defense was going to be a lot better than it is. So their point totals, the lowest they've allowed was at 20 in week 1. Otherwise, 29 every other week. And the lowest amount of yards allowed was 369 in week 5 versus New Orleans. 374 yards or more, with 3 games of 400 or more allowed on the season. Green Bay is going to be putting up a lot of points this week. And if there was ever a week to start Robert Tonyan and do kind of anything, it would be this week. I'm kind of taking a half stand on him, and a guy where I've said pretty consistently you don't need to start him and don't need to even roster him. He's my tight end 15, which is technically very high for him. If he does not do it here, he's never going to do it ever. He's just been awful. He's had 1 game of any sort of startability and has been 10 yards or fewer all the other ones. He's been absolute garbage this year. It has been almost baffling. And then A.J. Dillon is a near top 24 running back, because he's in a good spot and running back's terrible. And I don't like it, but he's almost a top 24 player here, because there's the list of guys to start is very, very shallow. And our last game of the day, so I can get out of here, because I want to watch these New York Knicks playing the Boston Celtics, and it's already started, but I want to get in there before the second half starts. So Kansas City versus Tennessee. Kansas City favored by 5.5, 56.5 point over under, the highest total of the week. One of 2 games with 50 plus. The other one is a Rams minus 15 scenario. So it shows what this week looks like. Kansas City side, just like Green Bay, start the main 3. Darrell Williams, though, is definitely thrust into a top 10 role. He's done 2 things this year that Clyde Edwards-Helaire has not done. 1, 2 rushing touchdowns in the same game. And the other was 20 plus carries. We had to look, how much was Jerick McKinnon really getting involved? 59-23 split favor going towards Williams. Only 4 touches, though, for McKinnon. He had a few more targets and that come down with it. And Mecole Hardman is the only other guy who's really spent any sort of time on, because Josh Gordon has, he's seen 15 total snaps in 2 games. You don't have to talk anything about them all. This is unfortunately kind of what I thought would happen with Josh Gordon, but I didn't really want to take any sort of victory laps on him because he was unhelped. But Mecole Hardman, back-to-back games of 5 targets. Only did that once all of last season, and has not gone for 3 or more straight games of 5+ targets since the first month of his career, all the way back in 2019. I'm bullish on him for 2 reasons. A, this week's terrible. We know this. B, 7 wide receivers in the last 4 games have had 60 yards or more against the Tennessee Titans. think there's a shot he can turn into a fine enough game and a replacement type performance in your flex here in week 7. And the last team on the day, Tennessee Titans. Henry and Brown are absolute must starts, but A.J. Brown and Julio Jones both missing practice. Now, Julio, we thought would be much more of a wait and see, as he wasn't able to finish the Monday Night Football game with the hamstring, and he's just, I guess, going to deal with this the entire year, and it's always going to be an issue for him. We thought 3 weeks or so would be enough for him to kind of get back into shape and be all right with it, but this is just kind of how his season's going to go, I guess, and it's going to be a completely lost one. And the Atlanta Falcons won out, did a pretty good job, I guess, in dumping him. Big old shrug, I guess. Tannehill should be a great start. But Henry scored so dang much. He's almost as much touchdowns. I think as much scoring as like the New York Jets have as an entire team. But Tannehill has only one finish that's inside the top 12. And that finish was the only one that was higher than quarterback 17 on the week. Now there's about 26 starting quarterbacks this week. So we gotta be in a good enough spot in a game with a total that's this high. We think, well, Ryan Tannehill's going to do well. Well, one, he needs his receivers. If Brown or Julio misses this game, that's a first off a problem. But Derrick Henry does so much for this team. He is by far and large, I think, the offensive player of the year, as at least till week 6 so far. But if he does not have his big weapons, I am not recommending any of the replacement options. We did see Westbrook-Ikhine kind of step up last week, but in the past, Jeremy McNichols, Josh Reynolds outplayed him back in the Jets game where we thought we might have some sort of streamability for Westbrook-Ikhine. So we're trying to hope that it is Julio Jones and A.J. Brown out there for Tannehill. If Tannehill does not have one or either of them, he's probably, one or both. You'll either most likely not to definitely not be a top 12 option for me. There's just enough guys that are just kind of all the same that I'm not saying he's any sort of a great start over any other guy in that sort of group with this situation. So with that, in and out in a half-hour time, GR Weekly going to be back on Friday. And again, those audios, if you do miss this, I guess you are listening, but if you do miss the live shows, the day after is when we put up the audio. So if you were not able to join for the live show, thanks for listening to the audio. And if you do see the live shows, great, cool. And then the audio is going to be the day after. So with that, schedule Monday, Wednesday, Friday is me, 7:30 for GR Weekly. Tuesday and Thursdays, you got Gary and the crew getting defensive. And then you have Kyle on the weekend with the slate. Overall on the Gridiron Ratings YouTube channel, and I think they also post to Twitter on the Getting Defensive as well. And with that, it was the first time or last time you spent your time with me. I appreciate it as always. And with that, hope all goes well in this Thursday night football game and we get an actual game out of it. Otherwise, we're going to be back on Friday to talk about it and preview the remaining 1 p.m. and all of the rest of the 4 p.m. and primetime games. See you guys